Welcome to another exciting adventure into the occult sciences. This is Grand Master Dr. Thor Templar. And I'm going to cover today really an interesting area that comes up very often. And that is mental magic versus sorcery. Now, everyone wants to grow in power as much as possible, as fast as possible. And that's what occultism really is all about. It's about shaping the universe into your reality. Or as I like to say, there is no reality until the occult scientist creates it. And basically, it is your reality that it has value and that's important. And what you do in life, particularly as an occult scientist, is that you bring people into your reality and you make it their reality. It is the only reality that counts. And you know, this is so true in general in life because we all live in our own reality depending on who we are. Do you think that a movie star's reality is the same as yours? Do you think Tom Cruise gets up in the morning and has to deal with lines at the local store, or has to go to a dirty gym, or does whatever it is that? Do you think he's treated the same way when he goes on an airplane or any place? Do movie stars ever pay for a meal or a drink? So their lives are very different, and they've created their own reality with the help of course, big buckos. And but the point is that they've created this reality. And people live in their reality. You don't go to a place where someone who has a power and tell them what to do. I frankly doubt you're going to tell any wealthy or rich person what to do. They have choices. You're going to do what they do, or they're going to leave and do their own thing, meaning their reality is imposed upon everybody else. And as an occultist, you are doing the same thing. You want to impose your reality on someone else and get them to blend into and be part of your reality, and then have the desired results within that reality that you want that person to do or you want to achieve. Meaning they're going to be confined, or they will be to a reality that manifests your desire. So if you want a particular person and you want them to be with you only, you're going to take them and put them in your reality, and your reality is what counts and what's going to control them. The only thing that is different there is the fact is they don't know that you're controlling them and probably never will. So it's all about you creating your own reality, and there is no reality. The only reality that counts is the one that you've created, and that's where everybody else is going to operate from. They live in your reality. You don't live in their reality. So it's very important to have that mental attitude from the very beginning when you do any kind of occult science practices, because that's really the core of everything. That's the really core belief that you have to work from, and that's what occultism is all about. Occultism, as we talk about in Foundations number 1, What Can I Manifest, is all about manifesting. Now, once you reach a certain level as an occult scientist where you're able to manifest and you've created the reality that works best for you, the ultimate then is to move on to the next level, and the final level, of course, which is what the purpose of having it is, ultimately. And that is ascension out of the hell realm prison is called Earth, because there's absolutely nothing here of value whatsoever. And all the little toys that the rich people have, and they want to live longer, and they want to get rid of their big fat bellies and sagging tits so they can live longer in this shithole of a reality that we live in, is all delusional thinking and gains them absolutely nothing. Even though we are not in favor of short lives. Matter of fact, long lives is important because you're able to do so much. And it takes so long to learn everything because you've been living in someone else's reality for so long and so conditioned that you don't know what the true reality is. And now you're creating your own reality. And unfortunately, most people don't wake up to these facts until they're in their 50s or 60s, and your life is over with as a general rule. basically you don't have much of a life for 20 years. You're not really doing anything until you're 20, and even after that, there's usually most confusion in people's lives up into their 30s. Once you reach a certain step and you get to your 50s or so, how much time do you have left? 20, 30 years? That isn't much time, particularly since by the end of your life, usually the last 10 years can be physically, you can be physically severely disabled or limited by that period of time. It may even be limited by the fact that you have limited income because you can't work 24 hours like you did in the past and push yourself. So you're probably on top of being limited physically and having multiple illnesses or body problems. You're going to have money problems as well. And you can't say, well, so spend all this money and pay it back later. There is no later. And that is the serious problem. So you have this limited time frame. So living longer is a goal and part of the occult sciences, but it's not a goal into itself. It's a goal so you can achieve the next highest level. But few people are really interested in that, and that's just way above my head, man. I'm still trying to catch the perfect wave. So the idea is that you're interested in is about empowerment, and that's about manifesting. That's about making your life better and being in control so that you can achieve more levels of personal comfort, support, etc. And that's, of course, what occultism is all about. The rest of it is all a nice little fantasy, but if you don't have control and you don't have what comes with control, you're never really going to reach high spiritual stages. And those that try and jump from that level into spiritualism, such as becoming a monk or something, has unfortunately just traded one prison for another. I mean, because most monks are so out of touch with reality, living in a fake society, that they have no context of being able really to go on to the next level. They're going on to the false created world that most religious monks live in. And that's the spiritual world, which is basically based on other people's generosity. I mean, the first thing that a lot of monks do, particularly in the Buddhist tradition, is they go out and beg all day. Well, you might as well have a job then, shouldn't you? Well, it is a job, isn't it? So, and most people go into those kind of practices to hide, similar as in the Western traditions, particularly within the Catholic Church, is that it's known to be a place to go if you're a homosexual. It's a good place to hide and be around a lot of boys. Or even worse with women, I guess, which has similar needs of being a lesbian aspect, is that they're hiding from the world as well. So, that certainly isn't a person who's achieved much spiritually or will, and we've seen exactly what all these great foundations of religion have brought us, which is zero. And it's not like they haven't had time. Even the youngest, stupidest religion of Islam has had 1,500 years to create nothing but garbage. And apparently, in recent times, their whole goal is to kill each other. How nice. Allah is proud of you. So the idea is that, all in all, it's about manifestation and empowerment. Everybody wants Hollywood abilities, and they want to get these as fast as possible. And I'm assuming it was the same way in ancient times. But of course, the actual structure that people lived in ancient times tend to foster deep study and application to things other than texting. Oh, excuse me, I got to stop this recording. Anyway, I've got a text. I'm sitting in a chair making a recording. Oh, sorry, cannot talk. Must press buttons like retard. I mean, when you have a society that is based on using backwards technology instead of using the original voicemail, we've got serious problems here, boys and girls. So this is the mentality that you're living in, and you're living in that structured world. I don't live in that world. I live in my structured world, and others will conform to me. But you have the pressures of outside society constantly doing this. So when you have all these distractions, you have all the things, you have to make a living, you have to do all these things. It's not the same in ancient times where basically they didn't even have excellent lights. When it was dark, that was it. Everything was gone. They didn't have 50 things distracting them. They didn't have video games and takeout pizzas and other things where they could indulge themselves and not get into something. So it was much easier in those times to devote yourself because there wasn't anything else. You didn't have books, you didn't have TV, you didn't have toys, you didn't have computers, you didn't have anything. So if you were lucky enough to have some study material or someone to guide you, that's all you did. But we must not overestimate, like most people do, living in some sort of sword and sorcery novel or some New Age nonsense, that for some reason all these ancient people were so powerful. They did everything, including not having had toilet paper or lights. So the idea is that it is amazing that people want to give credit to societies that really never did anything. And certainly, occultists have done very little in the bigger picture. If you look at things, in the end, so many other things have influenced the world past the tradition, and there really isn't any particularly potent, it appears, dramatic magical systems that can overcome military might, because those with the strongest military is the belief system that's ruled. Plain and simple. So, it was the Romans once, it was Attila the Hun, it was the Mongols, and all of these had absolutely nothing to do, and all had mystical occult systems. It had to do with military might, and that's the bottom line when it comes to things, in terms of the bigger picture. In terms of the individual, you can fight all you want, but you can't fight as an individual against massive armies. So this is where a cult power comes in, of being able to create your own environment. So everybody wants to be able to do those things, and the most popular ways, of course, of doing these things is mental magic, because it's the easiest, it requires the least amount of tools, and it is more socially acceptable than what we call sorcery. The problem with mental magic is that while while there is power within that, you have to also understand, and I cover this in the lecture of the mind, the brain, and the consciousness, of the fact of that you've got to understand how the mind and the consciousness work together and what's empowered, and where does that energy come from. People have the illusion that the brain itself produces massive amounts of energy and can do anything, and it's just a matter of tapping into that. Now, the brain itself doesn't produce anything, but there is a factor in the fact of how the consciousness, which rules the entire magical world, otherwise known as the inner magical being, this is what manifests everything. It has nothing to do with the mind, and actually you have to, the inner magical being has to kick the mind in the proverbial ass to get it out of its way. So the idea is that this image of psychics being able to move the world and bend objects and do sword and sorcery type things does not come from the mind directly. It comes from the mind connecting to sources of power. So the mind is a big conduit that channels things and assists in a process somewhat. Usually it blocks everything. It's the inner magical being that does everything. And evolving that inner magical being to get to these level of empowerment is what the guild is really all about. And we are pushing this to the front. This has been taught in inner orders mystery schools for thousands of years. And the illusion of the mind has been pushed on the public because that's what they buy into, and it's pseudo-scientific. When the mind is nothing more than a sense, it is your sixth sense. Extrasensory perception, as people think of ESP, is basically your seventh sense. But again, you need to check out that lecture, Brain, Mind, and Consciousness. Now, using all the techniques that are based in pretty much our foundation text, our new edition of the sexy title book, Psychic Sexual Command, which basically is nothing more than a psychic training system with emphasis on programming yourself, and then ultimately taking this programming and this empowerment to affect your environment, which means other people. And like everything in life, meeting your all your needs in life are important as well. But it's a sexy title, but really it's all about programming and drawing into you all the necessary empowerments that you need to achieve what you want in life. This combined with Tibetan mind power system, which is a advanced form of body energy and what is often been called empowered visualization, which you're basically empowering what you're doing and generating large amounts of energy with your visualizations, which is critical because visualizations are weak without empowerment of them. So these basic mind systems are very critical, and the core abilities all deal with these things. And again, the core abilities are outlined in our Foundation 2, which talk about what you need as these core abilities to reach these high states of empowerment. So, there is this whole complete system, which again is fully talked about in its own lecture under, where do I start? The beginners tab is very critical, and we take you step by step of what you have to do. But what we're covering here is this mind power techniques or mental magic versus more traditional magic or sorcery, as we like to call it, because sorcery is non-religious energy occultism or occult sciences. When you start using the term witchcraft, you're talking about something that conjures up mostly images of religious practices. And sorcery is non-religious magical practices. It's basically a technology. So people have put negative connotations onto sorcery. Webster defines it as conjuring up demons. This is all nonsense. Sorcery is a French word. Basically, there's a sorcerer, a male witch, and a sorceress, a female. Sorcery is basically doing magic or occult sciences or casting spells. And these spells have been used throughout the world, no matter what your religion is, and people combine in what that is. So it's a factor that is important to understand, because we don't believe in or have use for any religion, even though we consider ourselves very spiritual. And there's a big difference. So the idea is that with that, is that people love the basic two systems there, and they are excellent mind systems, and they do and will help your life dramatically. And of course, they take a lot of time. What the problem is that getting through your mind blockages, getting the proper programming into your intermagical being, which is basically the key to all the programming. That's what you're trying to do. And the book uses other terms, getting into your mind or brain, but really what you're talking about is the intermagical being, which makes things happen. Because it's not just about having your mind do something as you consider the mind to be, because the mind itself is very weak. It's your intermagical being that makes it happen. But your mind is constantly slamming the door on that, building up these great walls around it, and programming breaks these down, and it takes time. Now, most people see results pretty quickly, and of course, they don't see the results they want to. They haven't grown to 10 feet tall. They haven't somehow been able to gather all the gold in the world into their house. And since these types of things haven't happened, they tend to discount the effects. And as we always stress, you've got to look for all the little things that are happening in your life. And those should be a steady increase of positive things happening in your life. First of all, you should be eliminating a whole bunch of problems that you're causing. And by doing that, the less problems you have, meaning instead of putting out fires all the time, you use these abilities to increase your quality of life and to get what you want out of it instead of solving problems. And that's very important to understand and what you're working towards in any mind magic or sorcery system. And that is to actually stop having problems so that you can get to work on greater success. There's an old saying that I'm too busy making a living to get rich. And this is even true in actual occult science practices, if you're constantly working on problems that you keep running into and you must be causing to some level, then you're never going to get to a stage of empowerment. You're going to keep solving problems. You keep solving problems, you're not bettering your life. To somewhat you are, obviously, but the whole idea is it's not trying to be even that everybody wants to get to. It's wanting to get to higher states of empowerment to start getting what you want out of life. And I hate to say more out of life because it tends to be very materialistic and say, well, you just want more. Well, it's not just about being more. It's about taking care of what you need and making life as enjoyable as possible and being able to then explore into the higher realities. So you want to get to that level where you're manifesting what you want in life and not putting out all these fires. So that's the first thing you want to look at and try and change. And you want to look at all the little things in your life. And once you get to that cert even level, you want to see all the little changes, and that's what you have to. Things are not a radical change in life. And you've got to understand that. It's going to be a gradual building of empowerment as you build your own personal power. And then this personal power is then brought out and used in life. This personal power will then start changing your life in general. And this doesn't happen overnight. And everybody wants these kind of Hollywood effects. And the point is that if it was easy for everybody to do that, then it would be some sort of bad Hollywood movie where everybody was walking around zapping each other psychically, and half the world would be robots and the other half would be controlled. It doesn't work like that. And there are many factors in life. And, life and magic in general, as so many aspects of life really are. Life, as we say in our ritual team, is that, doing rituals for people is 50% magic and 50% counseling them to stop making the same mistakes they did in the past. If you keep acting in the same way, and I think it was Einstein that said that, if you use the same thinking that caused the problem to try and fix the problem, it isn't going to work. And, that's extremely true. So the point is, if you keep making more and more problems and let's say you grow in magical power, all you're going to be doing is spending all that empowerment that you've just learned and done through magic is just going to be putting out more and more fires. So, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of evolving, and these things take time to apply into your life. It's not something that happens 1, 2, 3. Now, we're trying to design, and that's why we have special occult power tools and certain oils and so forth that have energies in them to move people up empowerment quickly so they can get results that they desire without having to become a monk and study all these things. The whole idea is to do things, is to empower yourself and to activate the inner magical being as fast as possible. But with that said, it's very difficult because your consciousness, your mind, is going to fight that with every ounce of strength it has. It's not going to accept you going on to these levels. So there's this whole great inner fight going on between you and this whole mental process. And it isn't about releasing energies from your mind. It's about connecting to streams of empowerment that you draw in with your mind, quote, focusing on it, when that's basically the inner magical being is doing all that. But using mind magic, people are thinking that somehow they're releasing this giant energy field within the mind and that it can do everything. Well, as I said, the mind's just a conduit. It's connecting to and bringing things in. And that's how you build these energies. You can build them within your energy bodies and have certain effects. But ultimately, you have to connect to powerful streams, which you then bring in and project out to your particular goal. Now, with that said, when you're trying to do this all in a mental form, without using any tools, without using assists like oils and so many other things that are out there now. It's a very difficult process even to get behind, because as a society and in general, we are entirely 100% based on tool reality. Meaning we're not smart, the computer does it. We can't travel right, the car is there. And depending on the technology, and we're moving towards the fact that we have less and less control over the technology. A car still has to be driven and piloted, but what we're really doing with cars is we're trying to make them as automatic as possible so that we don't do anything. And this is how most technology works, is that we get less and less part of it, and it's more and more automatic, which pushes us out because we are so inferior, or so we think. So this is a real serious problem. If you're just doing mental magic and you're not using any type of tools, if you're not burning additional candles and doing more sorcery practices, if you're not using the tools, oils, other things, you're disconnected from the process and you don't believe it works because your mind is telling you, that evil little dictator bastard that's in your head is telling you that none of this is real and none of it can work. And you ultimately believe that, and your self-esteem in these areas believe that this is really negative and wrong, and you cancel out, or you slap that in a magical being to the curb. So the idea is that you depower yourself constantly because of that. But opening the channel is just one thing. Once you open the conduit, and it's a conduit, you have to then bring things into that conduit. And it's very difficult to only sit there and do practices. The core abilities, which are critical to know, the meditation, the visualization, the concentration, all of these are boring. You couldn't get more boring and more difficult things to do, because ultimately mind control, which means controlling your mind, is extremely difficult, and the boringness of what it takes to concentrate and do things is something that the mind fights against all the time. It wants to be active. It wants to be a video game jump around. Click, 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 click. That's what your mind wants to do. You have to grab that mind by the back of the neck and slam it to the ground and take control of it. So trying to do these things in a very nebulous fashion, nothing really to hang on to, it's all a meditative state, it's all thinking and picturing, is a real problem. And of course this is overcome by a dramatic degree by the revolutionary sigil system that the guild is offering now, because it gives the mind a huge amount of things to think about and work on, while also freeing the inner magical being. But there's always that constant conflict going on. And it's always nice to have things to grasp upon. This is why, in general, occult power products are so important, particularly as we are moving towards in the future here, is having your own personal power bag in particular, which is filled with empowerment items that you constantly have with you, that are constantly there and are something physical you can grab onto, as well as being these conduits and actual direct connections to streams of powers, energies, spirits, etc., that you then draw upon. So these are very, very critically important to understand and have. And the basic psychic systems, which are very common and they're out there in many fields, and the reason they're there is because a lot of it is just plain old hat. It's very easy to find all this information of these so-called psychic techniques. It's generally looked at as brain power. Yeah, it's brain power. That's very scientific. They say it everywhere. It's really great. And, it's perfectly non-threatening and non-religious, so, everybody can do it. After all, even some religions like the science of the mind and others work on these kind of concepts and so forth. So, you have all these milquetoast society accepted techniques that mind power is all about. The problem is unfortunately with all mental magic systems, because you're not going to spend a lot of time developing core abilities. You're not going to become a master meditator, concentrator, etc. And no matter who claims they can and cannot do that, I tend to think that their capacities are pretty low. You can't go in and out of mental states at will that you want to. It's a struggle, it's difficult, and there's 50 different distractions. And this is very typical in life. Well, I'm going to do my meditation, man. Oh, what was that over there? Do I smell that nice bread baking? Oh, did somebody bring in a new croissant? Oh, is that a cappuccino? Oh, what's on TV? Oh, what's that tune playing? This is what's going on in your consciousness. And, there are some people that claim they can and not. And, of course, then there's people who do some sort of meditation. But what are they meditating on? And what consciousness level? Are they just zoned out morons? Yes, we are Zen practitioners. We reach nirvana of nothingness. Yeah, because the Zen practitioners are known, particularly the masters, of beating their pupils to death. I guess that comes from being in a perfect state of Zen rage, which is what I love. Zen rage. Matter of fact, we do have a whole system, or I should say a whole technique of Zen rage, which someday we will release to the public. But all in all, you need to channel these, and you need to have all these basic things. Now, we start everybody out with these systems because they're critical. You've got to know what you can manifest and understand. There's no use visualizing something if you can't manifest it, because it's not in your sphere of influence. It's not something that is possible or even probable. So you need to know what that's all about. You need to know how that works in every single area of society, from gambling to jobs to relationships. There's what can you manifest within the realm of magic. So that's critically important. And it's critically important to have all the core abilities, because sorcery doesn't work very well unless you can concentrate and meditate and visualize. It's all part of a bigger system. But when you start breaking this away, I don't want to do them occult practices. Mommy said it was bad. It's evil. Satan, it's about Satan. Anytime you use candles, it's kind of, altar cloths and altars. Oh, that reminds me of Satan. I mean, this is how a lot of people react. Of course, unless you're an Indian or an Asian who put altars right in the opening of the frickin' restaurant when you walk in there. They got their goddamn altars with their Buddha heads right on there in front of you. Ah, that's sweet. Or if you're a featherhead Indian, they're all so conscious. They know so much, the shamans, who have the highest alcohol rate of any people. I'm not putting down those traditions. I'm just saying you can just see how things are looked at differently. And fine. So if you're an Asian and you have little Buddha statues and you have purple little gods and 40 heads and 60 arms, that's perfect. That's beautiful. Some people, them people got them nice beliefs. Them American Indians with their eagles, they fly around. Ooh, it's cool. They can take all the drugs they want. It's okay with me. It's spiritual. Got some of that peyote. So, yet someone else puts an altar up, and it's evil. But, of course, this doesn't seem to be a problem with Latins and with Catholics, apparently, because they're so used to having statues and lighting candles and oils and incenses that going from Catholicism into magic ain't too difficult. Other Western religions probably have problems. But that's not the case. So the point is that there's that fearful line and even that judgmental by society that, of course, if you have an altar up in your house, say, we know what you're doing. You're sacrificing babies on the weekends, aren't you? And drinking blood. That's what you cultists do, don't you? So But it's okay for a Baptist to get a glass, and I'm talking about a glass that you drink in their rituals at their altars that are supposed to be blood. That's okay. And let's not forget the Catholics who get to eat the flesh of Jesus. That's not, I'd like a Jesus burger to go. So the idea is that, all in all, these are the kind of ridiculousness that you need to break and get away from these social conditionings that are happening to you as well. And understanding the process that has to be done. The process is, if you want empowerment, you have to move from the mental magic, which is the foundations, into the basic sorcery practices as outlined in our new courses that has recently been published, and using occult power products. There is not enough power in mental magic to produce the kind of effects that people want. Now, all the books say this, and they have to say it. The minute you go out and you start writing texts or talking about how, yeah, this stuff works pretty good, but, you got to work. You got to go out there and do them push-ups, You got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You got to run around the block. You want to get fit, You got to practice. You got to do things. Oh, what the hell is that guy talking about? This guy over here told me all I had to do was to eat Cocoa Puffs in the morning, drink hot chocolate, and I'll become master. What are you talking about? And of course, that's what you're fed. And if you don't feed people some of that nonsense, they never will buy anything. So, you're either going to get up and run around the block, or you're a Cocoa Puff eating reality person. And the only thing a Cocoa Puff is going to give you is a fat belly. So the point is that that's the reality of it. Well, there isn't one. And when people get into mental magic and they've read all the books and they all say you can do anything, and there are some very potently strong mental magic practitioners, particularly generally the people that tend to write a lot of these books, well, most of them, 99%, are frauds that are just writers and think something is happening and it's an interest of theirs. Like talk show hosts that talk about alternative sciences and realities that have no background whatsoever. It's an interest of mine. I think it's an interest to you. Well, we can tell that from the crappy shows you put on and the bozos that you allow to talk. But that's another story, boys and girls. So the idea is that with all that, you've got to understand that you need to move to next levels. And the empowerment that some people have natural abilities, and this is a small percentage of the writers out there, who are just very good at this. And I've known several of them. And everything these people do work for them. So these people do mental magic, they get good results from it. They do sorcery, they get good results from it. They use magical machines, they get good results from it. And this is just so true. Yet if you take a person and they say, well, you have them, well, here's a magical machine, they weren't able to do the psychic magic very well. They don't do the machines well. They fail 99.9% of the time. So, it has to be whether you got it to begin with. And once you're good at something, you can incorporate other things and then find things that work better for you in general. But you must move through those stages because there just is not enough energy through that. And you can't do sorcery unless you have the core abilities down, unless you can visualize, concentrate, and understand the particularly the psychic techniques that are detailed in Psychic Sexual Command and in the Tibetan Mind Power course. These are critical to make sorcery work and anything else you get into, including those magic machines that everybody wants to play with now. These psychic crutches with dials on them. So the idea is that all of this, if you want to work from, you need to do that. But you can't do one or the other. You can't go into sorcery and ignore the core. You can't ignore the core and go into sorcery. And you certainly can't jump ahead into other things. Now, what we've done is by creating occult power products, we've been able to instantly empower people through these processes. Now, that doesn't mean that you're a master. And of course, people extrapolate on that, meaning that, I'm Merlin now. I got me a bag from the ITOS. And I'm going to go to the top of this building and I'm going to jump. I'm going to fly. I'm Merlin. I got me a bag. Well, it doesn't. That's not what it is meant. You're thinking that. And of course, part of projecting energies to people is giving them what possibly can happen as well. You don't sell a fast car by saying, yeah, stuff does 60 great, man. You put it on cruise control, you get on the freeway, and it's beautiful. No, you sell a Jaguar, this thing does 140, man. Step on 60 miles an hour, step on that pedal, and you'll hear it screech. That's what sells those cars. The bottom line is that you have to be able to get to the first step first. So the bottom line is that these techniques all work, and by using an already connected conduit, you're getting a conduit, something that's drawn that in, but it's connected to a stream of empowerment. And then you connecting to that saves you a lot of trouble and instantly empowers you, which means you're going to be able to manifest to certain levels right now. Other people that claim that you're going to do some technique and some little pamphlet-y thing sold by some goobah out of England, that you're going to do this 20 pages and everybody loves it. It's only 20 pages, man. I'm Merlin. And it's only $10. Yep, you chant goobah bala doo and jump off the building and you fly. It said right here in the pamphlet, I got this from England, man. This is the real shit. Well, I hope you have a good insurance policy and you have called your local mortuary. Because you ain't going to fly, you going to sink, boy. So, the bottom line is you've got to understand the bigger picture of all that and understand the actual concepts of what is going on there and what it takes. So, there are better, more efficient, revolutionary ways to start empowering yourself, and that's part of it. Proper training is yet another aspect that has to be done. So the occult power products work much better and much faster when you have your core abilities down. The occult power products are empowered and you are told how to do basic sorcery with them and how to increase the power and refine it to you by using sorcery techniques. So the web is weaved together through these processes, and you need to understand that. Because one of the biggest problems we have with mental magic people is that every book I've written, it says I can knock down walls, I can fly, I can make people into me slaves, I can get every person I want in every bar. So, that's what all these systems are telling you. And I can tell you right now, I know a lot of the people who sell these, particularly in the seduction community. And the only reason if they even have dates, is because they're extremely obnoxious people. And I don't know how you could possibly talk to so many people and not get a date. And whatever comes with that. So, there are standard scientific, occult scientific methods of doing everything, and this is what we specialize in, which means everybody will get some type of results. But that's not what anybody wants. Everybody wants high-level empowerments, and this is a process that takes time and requires the blending of mental magic and sorcery.
My meditation, you have interrupted. Curious you are. Many things can Yoda teach you.
So, as Yoda has spoken there, I will leave you with, as I always like to, and I'm now adding to, There is no reality until the occult scientist manufactures it. Others live in our reality. We don't live in theirs. So we create the reality. And believe nothing, question everything, and let the guild be your guide.